Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Israel at War, an update on TV7 News Israel. And this is day 585 of the war, which began on October the 7th, 2023, by a horrific attack and massacre by Hamas on Israel's southern district of the Negev, culminating in murdering hundreds upon hundreds of civilians, along with soldiers, police officers, and security personnel, and the abduction of more than 250 Israelis and others, out of which 58 remain in captivity. 20 of them are still alive. The other 38 are dead. And here with us on a day where Jonathan Hessen is off and I am filling in for him are three veteran, seasoned, former career officers in the Israeli military, along with other security experience. Brigadier General in the Reserve, Dr. Amnon Sofrin, formerly of the Military Intelligence Directorate and Mossad. General Sofrin, hello.
Hi.
Reserve Colonel Reuven Ben Shalom, formerly of the Israeli Air Force and a cross-cultural strategist in Israel's prestigious Institute of Higher Learning, or some of them. Colonel Ben Shalom, hello.
Shalom Amir.
And Reserve Brigadier General Doron Gavish, currently the commander of the Israeli Air Force Air and Missile Defense Task Force, formerly the commanding officer of the entire air and missile defense units in the Israeli Air Force. General Gavish, welcome. So our topic, obviously, is the presidential visit in the Arabian Peninsula. Donald J. Trump has touched down in Saudi Arabia. He will also visit Qatar and the United Arab Emirates. And as he was about to reach the Middle East, he managed to get from Hamas the release of a dual national American-Israeli soldier, Idan Alexander. Now, this is the first male soldier. There were several female uniformed personnel who were released, but this is the first male soldier released by Hamas from captivity as a gesture specifically towards President Trump, and specifically on the occasion of his visit bypassing Israel. General Sofrin, what are we to make out of this turn of events?
First of all, I think that the release of Idan Alexander is a very exciting moment. The fact that an IDF soldier nevertheless leave aside his citizenship, we'll get to it in a minute, but the fact that the first, what we call male soldier that was released from Hamas captivity is a very exciting moment, and this is a good signal. Now, of course, this relates to his origins. He's an American citizen. And of course, they want to apply to President Trump and to show good faith and goodwill. That means that in return, we are expecting, first of all, to get humanitarian aid into Gaza Strip. And second, we are willing to negotiate to get what we call the final deal, that when on one hand, will bring back all the people that are being held by Hamas back to Israel. And on the other hand, to get to a solution that will stop the war with the U.S. guarantee, and of course will force Israel to leave Gaza Strip. And I think that this is a signal of goodwill, and we're willing to negotiate. We are showing good faith and goodwill, and please let us talk.
Colonel Ben Shalom, people outside of Israel would have expected that the release of Idan Alexander would be received with great joy, not only by his family and friends and the population at large, but also by the government, because regardless of the modality and the circumstances, here is a brave soldier who withstood 584 days of captivity under very difficult conditions and emerged, as he said in a phone call with President Trump, a bit weak, but he will recover, he will recuperate. But for some reason, there is a sense of disappointment in government circles because it wasn't part of an Israeli-Hamas indirect negotiations through mediators, but rather an American-Hamas deal. Why the disappointment?
Well, first, I think I don't think it's a disappointment. By the way, the narrative of disappointment is usually used now by the government supporters, but it's just a narrative, I think. Everyone's happy. There's much joy, anyone that returns. But there is, in fact, and we must admit it, some kind of maybe strange feeling because the circumstances here are unique. Look, I myself, I'm a dual citizen. I'm an Israeli and also an American citizen still. And I was just thinking the other day, if I was being held by Hamas with a few of my comrades, and then someone came in and say, "Hey, Ben Shalom, you're an American, you're out of here." There is a strange thing about this, but of course we understand the broader circumstances here and with the American pressure. So I wouldn't even make much about this. Certainly it is a strange thing, and the sentiments are understood. I think the stronger sentiments have to do with the strategic situation that we're in because there's a lot of confusion. There was confusion throughout this war. One of the strategies or maybe tactics of this government throughout the war was having things vague. We never understand what the real strategy is, what the avenue ahead is, what's the next step, what is rhetoric, what is pressure. And here too, we're in a situation where we're not even sure what was discussed. Was it really over the head of the Israeli government totally? Was something promised? What does this mean? And the big question, what's with Trump? If the government until now thought he was 100% with them, with a Trump plan to evict Gaza, and now their rhetoric changed. Notice the Americans are saying the end of the war. All of a sudden, they're shifting gears, and all they're doing is promoting the end of the war. That's the big issue. That's the confusion, in a way, if you ask me.
General Gavish, around the world, and specifically in the Middle East, perceptions have a force of their own. They not only shape reality, they become reality. And the perception over the last few days, perhaps even more than that, ever since Prime Minister Netanyahu visited the White House, is that what used to be great warmth between the nations and governments of the United States and Israel, and personally between Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, has been transformed into, if not a big chill, somewhat along that line of getting cold and who knows, perhaps frosty in the future if the agendas collide. What do you think such perceptions cause among Israel's neighbors and Iran?
Well, first of all, I think that talking about the perceptions here in Israel, we are, I would say, we are jumping from the highest mountain to the lowest valley. What I mean is that when Netanyahu was the first one to meet with President Trump, so he was the best friends, and everything is super cool between them, and we're good. And now everything is bad. But I think that life is much more complicated than this. At the end of the day, between the two of them, I believe that still there are, at the bottom of the line, good relations. But we have to remember that at the end of the day, Israel is not the 51st state of the United States. Israel still has its only interest, and sometimes the interests are not fully aligned. And if interests are not fully aligned, people and countries and governments and leaders talk to each other. And the question is, do they have an open channels to do it? I think that the answer is yes. I don't think that today something is broken between Israel and the United States. I think that the channels are still open. I think that if we're looking on the main interest, for sure, if we're talking about the security ones, we are sharing the main ideas with regards to the Hamas, with regards to Iran, and with regards to others. But at the end of the day, we are two sovereign countries. We have to remember who is the superpower and who is a nation among nations in the Middle East, and to act accordingly. At the end of the day, I think that we still share values, we still share interests, and I think that a lot of good things that would be as an outcome of President Trump's visit would be also for the benefit of Israel.
Amnon, what Doron just described could be depicted by professional mental health experts as a bipolar attitude. And if I dared describe it with an additional pun, I would have said bipolar. But I don't want to remind ourselves of a very unfortunate event in the relationship. Now, when the Israeli government welcomed Idan Alexander, it mentioned two coinciding movements which brought about, according to the government, this release: the diplomatic action by President Trump and the military pressure that the IDF has been putting on Hamas. And just to emphasize this point, the minute the exchange, not exchange, one release was effected, but the minute this took place, the Israeli Air Force and ground forces resumed fighting against Hamas in Gaza. So what is going on right now? What is about to be the next move on the ground as well as in the negotiations in Doha?
First of all, I think that the term that, or the definition that not only, part of what brought Idan Alexander back home was military pressure. I'm not sure that this is the full truth, because what really brought Idan Alexander home was the American pressure and, of course, the will of Hamas to show good faith and goodwill to President Trump for next negotiations and so on. Now, under the American pressure, Israel sent the delegation to Doha, and just pay attention that Mr. Dermer, who is considered to be the head of this delegation, didn't join. It's only what we call kind of a technical delegation, and not headed by Dermer, who is considered to be the head as appointed by Prime Minister Netanyahu. On the other hand, of course, Mr. Witkoff will be there with his aide Adam Boehler, and this probably shows that they mean serious and they want to get into business and to try to apply pressure on Hamas to get into some agreement that will enable to, first of all, bring back all the people that are being abducted on Gaza, and on the other hand, maybe to end up this war, because I think President Trump doesn't want the war to go on. On the Israeli side, Israel is what we call demonstrating its muscles and mobilizing more people and more units into Gaza to show that we are willing and ready to go for the total war, to conquer all Gaza Strip and to demolish it and to get rid of Hamas and so on. This is, of course, very ambitious. It's more complicated to implement it fully, and if yes, it will take a long time, not a year, even more than a year, to clear all this Gaza Strip. And I don't think it is happening because I think that, first of all, the international pressure and the American pressure will not allow us to go on fighting so long. And I believe that we're moving towards some agreement that will put an end to the war without getting all the goals that the Israeli government defined.
Reuven Ben Shalom, you used to earn your living as an Air Force pilot, and what Amnon Sofrin just described is, in a way, an Israeli aircraft carrier being rushed into the Indian Ocean or the vicinity of the Persian Gulf in order to show the flag and to serve as a veiled threat that if the diplomacy fails, then we have some real power to employ without any intention, or at least there is the realization that we will not be allowed to go on and act. So if that's the case, why call up so many reserve soldiers, take them out of their homes and factories and universities?
Well, I think I disagree. I think that there's a real plan to implement Gideon's chariots. That's the name of the next phase in Gaza. So the preparations are real. And by the way, I don't support this government, and I disagree with a lot of their policies, but I have to try to connect the dots and understand what they believe and what they're pushing for. And what I see now is that Hamas wants to end the war. It seems to me like at least the rhetoric by the Americans is more and more towards ending the war, and I'm not criticizing them by this. Israel, for many years, we would say, what is our goal? Peace, quiet. Our goal is not to end the war. The government doesn't want to end the war. That's not a goal in itself. Their goal is to defeat Hamas. So there's a real clash now of goals of what they want to achieve. The Israeli government perceives that if the war ends and Hamas is still standing, this is a strategic threat, almost an existential threat to the state of Israel. That's why when we talk about negotiations with Hamas want negotiations that are release all the hostages and end the war and promise that we're ending the war. And we're willing to have Witkoff's mechanism of exchange here, ceasefire, prolong it, because the Israeli government does not plan to end until we win. Just the last thing about the analogy of the aircraft carrier, I agree with Doron that sometimes we think we're an aircraft carrier. We are really a speedboat, and we don't think in the large dimensions of aircraft carriers. But this speedboat right now, at least I see where it's heading. It's heading towards implementing the government's policy. And if it doesn't move in this direction, then there's no real negotiation to some kind of mechanism. It will be launching the next phase in the Gaza Strip. I believe they're really planning on it.
Doron, Donald Trump is not a professional politician. The only elected office he ran for and twice won was the presidency itself. He was never a congressman, a senator, or a governor. Yet now he is the politician in chief, and his considerations are naturally also political, and he can also see that his interlocutors around the world, Zelensky, Putin, Mohammed bin Salman, and everyone else are politicians with their domestic problems, with even if they are not leading democracies, they have to consider various interest groups, pressure groups, and the like. So he understands the predicament of Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition. And he knows that when he speaks about the end of war, what you and your colleagues referred to a moment ago, he may bring down the government, because at least two parties headed by Ministers Smotrich and Ben-Gvir would not stand for Netanyahu's acquiescence with Trump bringing about the end of the war. So what's the plan here, do you think?
First of all, I'm not sure that I agree with you about President Trump not to be a politician, an experienced one. We have to remember that, politics or being politician, it's not a curse. this is part of how we run the world. This is part of how we run the organization. Even as a businessman, there's a lot of politics in what you're doing. And President Trump is a successful businessman and also was for quite a while the president of the United States. So I think that he understands politics. He has his own way to lead his country, and this is a legitimate world. This is the system. This is how it works. So I really don't see a problem in here. This is the name of the game. Here in Israel, it is a bit different. We have to remember that the system in Israel is completely different from the system in the United States. The president of the United States is a very powerful leader. He could do a lot of things without asking anyone. In Israel, the way of our democracy with the coalition, sometimes you find yourself wanting to do all kinds of things, but then a very small party could almost stop you doing it, or you have to go back to election. So I think this is something which is much more inner Israeli, which is embedded into our system. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu, our prime minister, is quite experienced in navigating within those systems. I really hope for us that we will prevail, and at the end of the day, also, although we have challenges with our own system, by the way, it is not only with regard to the political situation or the diplomacy situation that we are in now. It is also about issues which are inner Israeli one, like the ultra-Orthodox, and their being part also of this nation with regards to they're going to the military, for example, which is another issue that might break this coalition. So it's more our, I would say, challenge within Israel than a US-Israeli situation. I think it might, just to say the last sentence, I think that it might bring the US to some point to be less, I would say, empathic toward our political situation, because it is so complex, because sometimes it is hard to make a decision, and I don't think that we would like to see the United States being frustrated from us, but it might happen with the two different systems and the capability of leaders here in Israel to make decisions.
General Sofrin, we talked here a few months ago, right after President Trump was inaugurated and started unveiling his policy, which has been emphasizing the economic parts, the economic aspects of international relations, bilateral as well as multilateral. He wants burden sharing. He wants other countries to invest in the United States, to give rather than to get. And at that time, we already mentioned the possibility that when the current memorandum of understanding, which is supposed to expire in 2028, signed by President Obama at the time, giving Israel between $4 and $5 billion a year in various forms of security and military aid, we will have to get by without. Now, a few days ago, in a briefing to a Knesset committee, Netanyahu himself has voiced this view, of course, with concern. He is not just a detached observer. So do you think that this is the trend of the near future? And if so, how can Israel prepare for such an eventuality?
The fact that President Trump is really paying a lot of attention and a lot of emphasis on economical issues all over the world, and he wants countries, rich countries mainly, to invest in the United States. He is moving along or increasing the tariffs in order to get more money, and by that is deteriorating the whole economical system of the world. But regarding Israel, I don't think that Israel will be damaged by these decisions, and Israel will keep on getting the American aid, just like they did before. I just remind all of us that in his first appearance before the Congress, Prime Minister Netanyahu, when he was younger, and I think it was in his first term, told the Congress that within 10 years we are going to get rid of the American assisting economical systems, and we will stand by our own. Many years have passed since then, and we are still relying on American aid. And if we look what happened to us since October 7th, without the American aid of money and, of course, ammunition and weapon systems, we would not be able to go on fighting for so long time. And we are dependent on the American economy and American abilities. And therefore, I don't see, first of all, us giving that up. On the other hand, I don't see the Americans, because of their relations, special relations with Israel and their commitment to Israel, cutting off suddenly this humanitarian aid or military aid to Israel and just leaving it for its own.
In one word, agree, disagree with what Amnon just said. Doron Gavish.
I always agree with Amnon and what he says, so this time I also agree with him. So why to disagree if I agree?
Reuven Ben Shalom, agree, disagree?
What America gives us is more than assistance. It's a collaboration. America benefits immensely with this collaboration, and I don't think it's feasible for Israel to break away from it, not in the foreseeable future.
Reuven Ben Shalom, Doron Gavish, Amnon Sofrin, thank you very much. This has been Israel at War, an update on day 585 of the war, with 58 hostages still remaining in captivity, 20 alive, 38 dead. We will be back with another edition tomorrow. For the time being, Shalom from Jerusalem.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.